George and Lennie are friends who share a dream to someday own a farm of their own. George is a small man with strong features, and Lennie, his companion, is a huge man with a shapeless face. Lennie has a slight mental disability, and he relies on George to protect and guide him. They are both close friends, and they behave like brothers. George complains about Lennie, but you can tell that they both have a deep brotherly love for each other. Lennie has a weird fetish. He likes to pet soft things like soft animals, hair, and so on. The problem is that when he pets things, he often ends up killing them by mistake. It's like he doesn't realize exactly how strong he is. At the beginning, we see George becoming very angry with Lennie because he finds Lennie carrying and stroking a dead mouse. George angrily throws the mouse away, worrying that Lennie will catch a disease from the dead animal. Let's find out what happens in the famous story of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to learn English in context with the famous story of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. The story was first published in 1937 and was banned in many places because the story was very controversial. It is still controversial, but now the story is known across the world and it is often examined by English students. Since this is an English in context lesson, we will be looking at the story during the first part of this lesson, and we will look at the words, phrases, and sentences during the second half of this lesson. There is a free PDF guide and practice quiz available for this lesson, and you can find the links in the description of this video. Hit that subscribe button and let's get started. George and Lennie go to a ranch in the hopes of getting new jobs. George tells Lennie not to say anything. He tells Lennie that he will do all the talking because he is not sure how the boss will react to Lennie. George lies to the boss. He says that he and Lennie are cousins and that Lennie was kicked in the head by a horse when he was younger. They are both hired. They meet a man called Candy on the farm. He is a handyman with a missing hand and an ancient dog. They also meet Curley. Curley is the boss's awful son. Curley and his wife are newlyweds, and his wife is extremely flirtatious, so naturally Curley is always suspicious. When George and Lennie are alone in the bunkhouse one evening, Curley's wife comes by and flirts with them. She loves attention. Lennie thinks she is so pretty, but George warns him to stay away. George has a feeling that it could be bad news for either of them to get involved with Curley and his wife. Later, George and Lennie meet Slim and Carlson. Slim is a man with great authority on the ranch, and he is impressed with George and Lennie's friendship. He thinks their friendship is very rare. Carlson is another worker on the ranch. Carlson suggests that since Slim's dog has just given birth to puppies, they should shoot Candy's ancient dog and just give him a puppy instead. George and Slim forge a friendship, and George soon begins to confide in Slim about his situation. He explains to Slim that he and Lennie are not really cousins, but they are just childhood friends. He tells Slim about how Lennie is always getting them into trouble, and how they had to flee from their last job because Lennie was accused of rape after touching a woman's dress. Slim decides to give Lennie one of his puppies. Carlson keeps telling Candy that he should kill his old and suffering dog, and when Slim agrees with Carlson, Candy finally caves. Now our story starts to take a turn. Slim is working in the barn and Curley is frantically looking for his very flirtatious wife. He can't find her anywhere. So, what does he do? He heads to the barn to accost Slim. On the other side, Candy hears George and Lennie's plan to own their own farm. He loves the idea so much that he offers his life savings to them if they will allow him to live there too. Obviously, George and Lennie agree, and the three make a pact to keep their plan a secret. Now remember Curly, who was fighting with Slim about his wife? Curly comes back to the bunkhouse and he is angry. He wants to make someone feel as bad as he does. And who is the easiest target? Lennie. Curly fights with Lennie, and during the altercation, Lennie crushes Curly's hand. Before Curly can do anything to get George and Lennie fired, Slim warns Curly that he will be the laughing stock of the farm if he gets them fired. The next night, most of the men go out and Lennie and Candy stay behind. Curly's wife is around. She flirts with them and refuses to leave until the other men return. She sees the marks from the fight on Lennie and she realizes that Lennie was the one who hurt her husband, and her husband didn't get hurt on a piece of machinery like he'd initially said. Instead of being mortified by this realization, she's actually quite amused. The thought of Curly being beaten by Lennie is amusing. The next day, Lennie accidentally kills his puppy. Curly's wife comes to console him and she confides in him. She tells him that life with Curly is disappointing and that she had dreams of becoming a movie star. Lennie tells her that he loves to pet soft things, so obviously she offers to let him feel her hair. He grabs her a little too tightly and she screams out. He attempts to silence her, but instead he accidentally breaks her neck. She's dead. Lennie takes off to the place that George told him to go to if there was ever any trouble. George and the other men soon discover what has happened and they gather a lynch party. George quickly goes to see Lennie at their designated spot. Lennie is really surprised that George isn't angry at him for doing a bad thing. George starts to tell Lennie the story of the farm that they will someday own together. As George talks about the rabbits that they will have on the farm, he can hear the sound of the lynch party approaching. Suddenly, George shoots Lennie in the back of his head. George leads the others to believe that Lennie had the gun, and he shot Lennie when he got the gun away from him. Slim is the only person who understands what really happened. He understands that George killed Lennie out of mercy because the lynch party would have made Lennie suffer before killing him. And that's the story of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. This is just a brief summary of the story and does not look at any symbolism or detail. Let's look at the words and phrases that were introduced during the story. Companion. This is a person or animal with whom one spends a lot of time or with whom one travels. Example, George was Lennie's companion. They traveled everywhere together. Mental disability. This is a condition that limits a person's intellectual capacity. It can happen as a result of an injury or a person can just be born with it. Example, Lennie had a slight mental disability. Fetish. This is a form of desire in which gratification is linked to an abnormal degree, to a particular object, an item of clothing, a part of the body, and so on. Example, Lennie has a fetish for soft things. Ranch. This is a large farm, especially in North America or Australia, where cattle or other animals are bred. Example, George and Lennie got jobs at a ranch. Ancient. In the context of the story and in an informal way, ancient is used to describe something very old. When we say that Candy's dog was ancient, we are saying that Candy's dog was very, very old. Flirtatious. This means to behave in such a way as to suggest a playful sexual attraction to someone. We describe Curly's wife as flirtatious because she likes people to think and feel that she is sexually attracted to them. Authority. This is the power or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience. Example, Slim had authority on the farm. This means that Slim had the power to give orders on the farm. Rare. This refers to something that doesn't happen very often. George and Lennie had a rare friendship. This means that they had a friendship that was not easy to establish. It was not the type of friendship that you see very often. Flee. This is to run away from a place or a situation of danger. Example, the criminal had to flee when he heard the police sirens. Caves. Here we are looking at the verb caves, and in the context of the story, it means to agree to something that you would not usually agree to. Example, he decided to cave and have a drink with his boss. This means that he would not usually agree to have a drink with his boss, but he eventually agreed to it. Frantically. This is to do something in a distraught way owing to fear, anxiety, or other emotions. Example, she frantically looked for her cell phone because she thought she left it on the bus. Accost. This is to approach and address someone boldly or aggressively. Example, Curley accosted Slim at the bunkhouse. PACT. This is a formal agreement between people. It's like a formal promise. Example, Candy, George, and Lennie made a pact to buy a farm together. Altercation. This is a noisy argument or disagreement, especially in public. Example, Lennie and Curley had an altercation. This means that Lennie and Curley had a fight or disagreement in public or around other people. Next, we have a very popular phrase, and this phrase is laughing stock. This refers to a person who is subjected to general mockery or ridicule. Example, he was the laughing stock of the company after they found him sleeping under his desk. People don't usually take the laughing stock seriously. Machinery. This is component of a machine. Example, the farm had different types of machinery. Mortified. This is to cause someone to feel very embarrassed or ashamed. Example, I was mortified when I fell down the stairs at my first day of school. Console. Console means to comfort someone at a time of grief or disappointment. Example, I needed to be consoled after my mother died, or Curley's wife went to console Lennie when his puppy died. Lynch party. This refers to a group of people who kill someone for an alleged offense. They usually kill the person by hanging. George wanted to avoid this for Lennie, so this is why he shot Lennie instead. And our final word is designated. In the context of the story, they speak about a designated spot if something goes wrong. This means an appointed place to meet if something goes wrong. Example, George met Lennie at their designated spot. That brings us to the end of our lesson today. Today we learned the story of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, and we also learned 20 new words and phrases. Don't forget to download your free PDF guide and to take the free quiz to practice everything you have learned. Those links can be found in the description of this video. Thank you for your time, and this is Ashley with Level Up English signing out. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.